Welcome to the Nobody Guide to Life, where we provide tips and tools for personal growth, personal development in your spiritual journey that you can use right now in your everyday life. I'm J.A. Plosker. Thank you for joining us. You can always find out more at thenobodyguidetolife.com, or you can check us out at Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's You, or you can join our Facebook group, Simple Spirituality. If you like what you hear on the show, we'd welcome a subscription or a review. We'd really appreciate it. Yoga is a big part of the day for so many people. At least for people I know, it seems everybody has some sort of yoga practice. Some people wake up in the morning and do it before work. Others hit the gym after work, make it part of their daily wellness routine. But for some people, like my guest today, they make it their whole life. Leah Bosworth is the founder and owner of Ironwood Yoga Studios. She began studying yoga in 1997 while pursuing her acting career in New York, and she fell in love with the practice. Now, after 15 years of experience, Leah has a deep understanding of the power of alignment and the intricacies of the human mind and spirit. She teaches with a fearless heart, and now she's with us today. So welcome to the show, Leah.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. So you have a really interesting background, your road to yoga. You started off with an acting career. Can you tell us a little bit about how your life unfolded and brought you to owning a yoga studio?
I can. It actually goes back before that. It was a long and winding road.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah. So it actually, I was thinking about this. I actually have been a teacher since I was probably like 15 or 13. I started out as a gymnast and I was a dancer. So I've always been in movement and motion. Right. And I found myself teaching gymnastics when I was young. So just kind of like, I just noticed, I was thinking about this, like everything I did in pursuing my own dream, I was always teaching it to other people. And then I actually became a hairstylist when I was really young, from 18 or 17, I think. So I did that for quite a while. That was sort of sustained me for about 18 years or so. And I also found myself teaching that as well. I went to an advanced training center for that and started teaching. And it was when I started teaching that I kind of knew I was a teacher. But then I just kept doing what I was doing. So then I found acting, fell in love with that, and then made a big leap to move to New York City because I like adventure. Yeah, and so from there, I just was pursuing my acting career, and I was also a hairstylist, and sort of just, and I started taking yoga when I was in an acting conservatory actually, and they were really big on movement and just making your body, making sort of fine tuning your tool, which was your body, and so that's when I started my first official yoga class, I believe. And what struck me about it is that I was had been a gymnast and a dancer and really connected to my body, but when I did yoga, It was so hard. I was like, why is it so hard for me? And so that actually I really liked that about it, that it just kind of caught my attention.
So that's interesting that yoga presented to you a challenge to what you'd almost always taken for granted. How did you handle that? How did you find that connection again through yoga with your body? How did that alter your perception, as say different from gymnastics?
Yeah, well, I like challenge, and so that made me kind of just want to master it. And so just like that it was something hard for me. So, and also I just kind of had to do it. I was kind of forced to do it for like 2 years.
Sometimes people will say to me, oh, yoga, I can't do stretching. I'm not that limber. That seems to be the perception that people have of what yoga is. And I think stories like yours are so interesting because there's an internal challenge with yoga and there's an external challenge. And I'd like to hear more from you about how you met that. How did all of that, when did it click for you? When did you find that connection, that fluid connection with your body? What was that moment like for you?
I think, it seems like it's external, but I think it's almost always internal, what we're going through. And I think that's true that, and I think it's very interesting is that so many people think that they can't do yoga or because they're not flexible. But there's another component, which is strength. And so I was very flexible naturally, but I didn't necessarily have the strength that yoga requires physically or mentally. It's really mental. It's like finding that that strength meant is that's what it teaches you. And so for me, I think there's so many different things. I think it was a teacher for me that really connected to after, just a few years of doing yoga at school and doing it at different places. And I found a really incredible teacher in New York City. Her name's Elena Brower. And she was teaching Anusara yoga at the time, which is very heart-centered and very alignment-based. And I think the combination of that and her passion really kind of started taking it deeper for me. And I think that's really when I understood that it was a very practical tool. Like, she just had a very grounded energy. And so that really helped me to understand, like, it just seemed normal to me, if that makes sense. Now, it wasn't, because sometimes it seems like it's, something that's sort of untouchable or new agey or not for the regular normal people. But she made it feel really relatable.
Can you address that right there because that little piece is so important for anyone listening. This idea of yoga being something that's very grounded. I agree with you. I don't think a lot of people think of it that way. A lot of people think they have to reach for this elusive star. Yeah. Can you talk more about that grounding piece? That's so important.
Yeah, it really is. And that's really it's the foundation of my yoga studio and my practice and my teachings is, we want to feel that grounded in being, but also, light and flexible. So it's really a juxtaposition of those two things. And so I think it's just funny. It's funny because yoga is such a practical tool, but it's also very complex and very intricate, which is wonderful, but it also can be a little intimidating or overwhelming. And it actually was, in the beginning, or a long time ago, it was actually sort of created for the elite or for, certain people. So it kind of did alienate the average person for a really long time. And even when it moved into the Western culture, it still was kind of like that. It sort of was this very elitist sport, if you will.
Yes.
And I think luckily, it's good and bad, really, the Western sort of take on yoga. I have mixed feelings and strong opinions on it, but I feel like it's unraveled it in a way. In some ways, because we've become really, the West is really kind of, we connect more with the physical aspect of yoga and the postures, and that makes more sense to us. And so it's been helpful because it's really started to bring it into the mainstream, and so people are starting to understand it more, and almost sort of letting go of the intricacies of it and the depths and the philosophy and all of that stuff, which is, it's okay. It's good if you want, just to kind of get people in, connected to it. We don't want to lose, all of the beautiful practice in the yoga, the philosophy and the yamas and the niyamas, like all of those things that people think don't relate to their life, because they actually do. I think that the shift of the practice in the West has really helped to kind of get people connected. And now, once people kind of understand the physical part, then they're a little more open to the more deeper intricacies of yoga and what it has to offer. So at our studio, I try to really make it normal.
Well, that's interesting because sometimes people will get lost on the pathways. There seem to be so many different schools, so many different philosophies. I know this conversation would take lifetimes, of course, but can you speak a little bit to that, to people who may be thinking, well, there's something at my gym on Mondays and Wednesdays, but then there's a studio, but then there's also places like Self-Realization Fellowship. And what are the differences between these? How does a person go about finding a studio or a teacher or a philosophy that really resonates with them?
Well, I mean, the first thing you have to do is just try it, and go to these places. I think gym yoga is going to be much more focused on the physical, and it's going to be pretty superficial, really, from what I've heard that across the board. Like it's just going to be kind of a workout, and there's usually going to be a lot of people there. And it'll do a certain amount. And then the self-realization types of places, it just depends on what you want and what you're looking for. I think that what I love about yoga is that there really is a practice for everyone. It just depends on what you connect to and what's important to you. So at our studio, I try to find a balance between, it's called vinyasa yoga, which is more of the flowy type of yoga. It's very physical. It's very physically challenging and mentally challenging as well. It's very much focused on the breath, which is really kind of all that matters. And then we also have the restorative yoga, which is much more like actually just what it sounds like, restoring the body, the mind, and the spirit. It's much more slow moving. You're going to hold postures for a longer period of time that are very supported and opening of the body. And then we do a yin yoga that's going to be more deep stretching. So those are still very physical though, you know, and ultimately what we're trying to get at is to be able to kind of learn how to meditate really, and to breathe and to create awareness in our lives. So it just depends on what resonates with you. All of those yogas are going to create those things for you. And so I really just encourage people to try different styles. I feel like the vinyasa flow type of yoga is really the type A personality tends to do that, you know, because they want to feel like they're moving and sweating and all that stuff. And it's really great too. You know, I think, you know, I don't want to ever discount the physical part of the practice because there's so many benefits to it. I think sometimes we get just a little bit attached to it in this culture, but what, you know, at our studio, I really try to encourage everyone, but those types of people to do the restorative and the more slow moving yoga. And 9 times out of 10, they do it and they're really surprised by how much they love it. Because they actually do need to slow down and know they do, but they just don't know how to do it on their own. So I find those really helpful. And then vice versa, you know, I think a lot of times people do the slower moving classes and they maybe need a little bit more of the energizing classes. So kind of like oftentimes at the end of class, I'll say, okay, like I'll offer an option of a certain type of hip opener or something. And I'll say, do your least favorite hip opener. So usually it's the thing that you don't want to do. That is the thing that you need to do the most.
Well, I think that right there is a absolute perfect summation of the path of personal and spiritual growth. It's the thing that we resist the most. And I think a lot of times people will resist something with postures or stretching or something they have to do in public. I know some people have told me they're embarrassed to go, or they went once and they couldn't do a posture and they never went back. How do you motivate your students if you see that? What do you say to somebody in that position? I think I just have so much respect for people. First of all, like I think about it a lot during class when I'm teaching, like how vulnerable people are when they come to class. Like, it's so huge. Like I think, oh my God, like we're all on the floor, like rolling around, we have our feet up in the air. Like who does that? You know? And so, you know, I just really, we're a very beginner friendly studio. That's kind of where for some reason, that's really like my passion and my specialty is really connecting people that have never done yoga before to doing yoga, to people that feel really uncomfortable and making it feel comfortable. So I try to create a space that feels safe for people and try to encourage everyone in the room to connect with each other. Because I think a lot of times you walk into a room and, you know, people know each other and they're talking and it can feel really intimidating. You're like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know where to stand. I don't know what do I do? So we try to give people a lot of direction and really just hold their hand in the beginning, but not in like an annoying way. Like, you know, it's like it's the same thing. It's always like about balance. Like really try to just, you know, I just try to read people and sense what they need. It actually, what you just said kind of brings us to a bigger question of what prompted you to open that yoga studio? Because I can hear in your voice the passion for the teacher. Sometimes it's hard to put things into words. Teaching's a calling, right? So it's sometimes hard to talk about how we teach. So that's something I wanted to ask is, what did prompt the opening of the yoga studio? It sounded like you wanted to provide a place for people to have these choices and to bring this philosophy. Is that true? Is that sort of what the driving force was for you?
I think there was a lot of driving forces. I tried to be very open in general with ideas and things in the world, and I rarely will say like, this is the thing.
Right.
But I do
right.
feel like that about yoga. Like, I do feel like it's good for everyone. And not every yoga is good for everyone, but it has something to offer everyone. I feel like it's literally the most perfect thing that was ever created. And because it really helps to get people connected to themselves and what they really want. And so I guess my overall sort of passion is to bring people together. Like, that's what's important to me, is bringing people
Right.
together and creating trust.
Right.
Like, I feel like we don't have trust in the world. And I feel like we don't really celebrate each other as much as we could. So when I lived in New York, I was always like kind of in awe of how many people I was around constantly. And I always thought, it's so weird that we don't like talk or like hang out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it should be a big party. But in general, I feel that about humanity. Like, I feel like there's so much mistrust in the world, and I feel like yoga really brings us together and connects not only with each other, but with ourselves. Like, connects us to a deeper place. And so I really just always wanted to have my own business. I've just always been a very independent sort of spirit.
Right.
And so it's just something that I've kind of always wanted to do. And then it just happened. I was teaching yoga. I'd been teaching for quite a while, and things just sort of shifted in my life with my partner. And we just started thinking, like, what are we doing? What are we doing with our lives? We were working in jobs and we just weren't very happy. And so we just wanted to create something that we were, building together and for each other. And I actually was teaching in Scottsdale at a spa, and one of my very favorite students, her dad had an organic living store, a business called the Organic Living Store, and they just bought a new a building in North Central Phoenix. And so she told me about the space there and said that, they had extra space and that I should really come over and open a yoga studio. I was like, it was just kind of serendipitous. We had never talked about it before. She was just like, you need to open a yoga studio. And I was like, okay.
Sometimes we start a business and sometimes a business starts us. So
it definitely felt like there was, like, Ironwood was definitely an energy that just had to be realized. I'm just like the navigator of Ironwood. So I went to the space, and it was just a big, beautiful warehouse space, and it was, just high ceilings and skylights. And, well, it wasn't beautiful at the time, actually. But we made it that way.
So I think that does answer that question before of how do you encourage your students? And the way you encourage them is by intentionally creating a space where they can have their apprehensions and they can have their fears, and it's okay to maybe, like you said, look a little strange or do something a little out of the ordinary. It takes a lot to create and hold that kind of space for someone. And now you mentioned your partner has a business with your business.
We have a business within a business. We have a couple of businesses. So my boyfriend, Scott Mills, he actually, it just kind of worked out that he had time to build my studio, and he just happened to be in construction for like 20 years. So,
wow.
And he also just seemed to be he's like a collector of things. So he had just like a lot of things in his arsenal, lots of materials and wood and steel and all kinds of stuff. So he just basically built my studio. And then in the process, he decided he wanted to start building furniture. And so he started just started finding logs and trees from around the valley, and started making furniture out of them. He just turned into a lumberjack. He bought 2 sawmills and started milling all his own wood. And so there's just like a ton of discarded trees and stuff around Arizona, like a lot of exotic wood, actually exotic hardwood from all over the world that people imported. And now, so he goes and collects all that wood, and then he mills it and he makes furniture. So my studio is, basically it's kind of a combination of an art studio, which is a whole other, like, I like to really support art and just sort of bring all different types of people together. So we have like the space is like, it's all white walls and wood, and we actually have art shows and parties and stuff there as well. So it sort of doubles as a community space as well.
That sounds like an unbelievable space. So you have the spirit going on and that mental aspect, and you have that really earthy. It sounds like it goes back to that thing you're talking about being how grounded it is, how grounded that space is. It's unbelievable.
It's pretty awesome. Like, people walk in and they're like, "Oh my God, what's going on here?" So it feels like it has that very like I said, art studio feel. But it doesn't feel too pristine. Like, it's very raw and soft and very comfortable. So it's sort of this really interesting place. Like, pretty much anyone that comes in there feels at home.
That sounds unbelievable.
You're going to have to come.
Oh, I'm going to check this out. From all those years of experience of teaching yoga and practicing yoga, a tip or tool that you can give our listeners that when this podcast ends, something they can use to really further their personal and spiritual growth?
I would say the number one thing is to practice.
Right.
To, find a way to practice, even if it's 5 minutes a day, just to, because ultimately yoga is about connection with the self. And so if you can even just take 5 minutes a day just to sit and be quiet, at the very least, and find that over time, that will really help. It'll become easier to go to class or to expand upon that if you just like set that time aside and be consistent with it. So consistency is the key, right?
I love that.
And then also really what I try to infuse, one thing I didn't say, where I try to make people feel comfortable with humor. And I really, ultimately, we want to feel lighthearted, right? We want to feel grounded and lighthearted. And, it's not so serious. So if we can, not take ourselves so seriously, and really just focus on the breath, like if you can go to a class and just focus on your breath, then you've done your practice, and nothing else really, everything else will fall into place.
Well, that brings so many things together so nicely, because a lot of the things we talk about on this show are mindfulness, meditation, and we try to do that with a sense of good humor. And I think if we're not waking up in the morning or going to sleep at night with an attitude of a little bit of discipline for our spiritual practice and a little bit of a smile when we reflect on the things that happened today, it makes the journey a little more difficult. And I think we can make it easier if we carve out that time and we can learn to laugh at some of the things that happen to us during the day. It makes us feel lighter, I think, and I think it grounds us. And that's really sounds like the theme of Ironwood, of your studio. That's
and
beautiful.
And laugh at stuff that happens on your mat, too. I think.
Yes.
I would just say we're not trying to get good at yoga. We're trying to get good at life. It's important.
I love that. Everybody listening, take that home. We're not trying to get good at mindfulness. We're not trying to get good at meditation. We're trying to get good at just being. And I think that's just wonderful. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Leah, so much for your time. Just thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. And to all of you out there listening, if you're curious about yoga, give it a try. Make movement, stretching, breathing, anything a part of your daily routine, your daily discipline. Check out a class. Doesn't matter where it is. Talk to a friend who does yoga. It's not always public. You can do it right in the privacy of your own home if you like. It's a great way to connect with your mind, body, and spirit. You can find out more about Leah at ironwoodyogastudios.com. The link will be in our show notes. And remember, you can always find out more at thenobodyguidetolife.com, or you can reach out to us on Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View, or join our Facebook community, Simple Spirituality. If you like what you hear on this podcast, please consider a review or a subscription. We'd really appreciate it. It really helps. Keep practicing and have a good week.